Okay, welcome back everyone to the first 2023 edition of This is Tech Talks. I have here with me my co-host Santosh, and then our guest for today, Christian. Santosh, how are you doing?
Great, great. I mean, finally, it's after 4 months. We did it like 4 months ago, and very excited for our first episode. And I remember I spoke to Christian last year that okay, we will do an episode, and then we said, oh, sorry, Christian, we decided to like end the season. And then I reached him out, yeah, let's do first episode with you. And he was really nice to actually be here. Thanks, Christian, for joining.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's glad to be here. Glad to be here with you today. And I'm sure we're gonna talk about some exciting stuff with the Cypress component testing and get some new insights on that. It's been a long work day for me, but let's talk about some more Angular.
Yeah, I guess for you guys it's like what 7 p.m. or something like that.
Yeah, and it's just like 10 hours of coding Angular and then straight to some meetup talk.
Great. Well, I'm fresh because I'm just starting my day. It's 8:30 a.m. for me right now, so I'll try and go light on you guys.
I mean, I'm just ending my day. It's 5:30 p.m. right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I have to still go ahead and do some work. But yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Okay, so Christian, what is Cypress? And then we'll get
So
into component testing afterwards.
Yeah, so Cypress is a testing tool that is it came as a nice alternative to Selenium testing, where it solves some of the the known problems with Selenium, where it's the flakiness that usually came with end-to-end testing. So Cypress is a solution for end-to-end testing that is basically testing like a real user would test a website that has some normal patience, and it will retry the commands and assertions it does. So rather than a lot of explicit weights, which you often see in Selenium solutions, you more like just write your test as the user would interact with the solution. Like you click on this button, you assert this is happening. And if it takes some time and there's a spinner in between and stuff, it's no problem because Cypress has some normal patience with that. And also it comes with some nice developer tools where you can like replay each like step of the test flow. So it gives like a nice that's overview of what exactly went wrong if your test fails. So yeah, it's a very popular solution now for end-to-end testing.
Yeah, I haven't used it like a huge amount. We have been starting to talk about it at work, but I've seen so many cool things that can be done with it. One of my friends, Jordan, actually works at Cypress. He's one of the an Angular GD as well, Jordan Powell. So I talk with him about it sometimes. Okay, so that's Cypress. What is Cypress component testing now? That's new, right? It's relatively new, I guess, end of last year kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, so before, like traditionally with Cypress end-to-end testing, you would load the whole application and you would run some DOM-based testing on that. Whereas with Cypress component testing, you can take a single component and it supports a wide range of different frameworks. So lately, it came with some very good support for Angular, where you can load up a specific Angular component, and then you would render that full component, and then you can do full test of that component. What many would call that kind of integration test on the front end. So the normal flow would be you would test everything on the front end specific to that component, and then you'd strip out the back end side. So you get more code coverage with the same amount of test, and you get more confidence. And it's this new approach. I guess it's in particular made famous by Kenzie Dotz in the React world, but saying write test, not too many, mostly integration. So it's this notion, like in the front end world, a lot of the errors is in the integration points. So by doing this kind of test where you find this perfect sweet spot between confidence and the cost of writing and maintaining the test, that's like the sweet spot in between, because you get testing the whole front end together.
Yeah, because I know some of the viewers might be aware, but the overhead, call it, or the amount of effort required to write tests is inversely proportional to the call it the scope of the test, right? Like unit tests are small amounts of effort, theoretically, right? Of course, there's always edge cases, right? But then you get up to end-to-end testing, like full Cypress pass. That scope is so big, right? And the amount of effort to now writing them isn't that hard, right? But maintaining hundreds of end-to-end test suites is more work than maintaining hundreds of unit test suites, right? So Cypress component test is a great little middle ground between that two, where you get some of the benefits of DOM-based testing, but some of the benefits of the ease of unit tests, I guess, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's this perfect middle. I got some. Can I share something?
For sure. Yep. So meanwhile, Christian, just a question, because many of probably our listeners might not be updated with what's latest going into the testing world, right? There was a time when we used to have Protector. What happened to that? So
yeah, so yeah, my stories for how I got into this is basically trying with the classic testing pyramid approach, which is what for a long time has been like the known approach for testing. And also like in the early age of front-end development, it was still like what people were doing. They were writing lots of unit tests, and I was working on a project where we did more than 10,000 unit tests, and we saw we didn't really get much value from them because we didn't get the confidence as we were not integrating with different components together. And then together I've started like this started happening in the React world with the saying made famous by these guys, Guillermo Rauch and Ken C. Dotz, that then not too many tests and most integration. So before it's like you should write unit tests and you should have 100% code coverage. Then it was like for applications, it was more like you cover the main use cases with integration tests. So so yeah, it was this perfect sweet spot where you have the as you just said, you have the unit test, which is in theory that's cheaper to write, but actually the setup can be more complicated with unit test than the integration test, because there's so many mocks and stuff you have to set up for unit tests to work. So so it's not even that it's not even that it's necessarily easy to write at this point, because there can be so many embedded, so many components and stuff that need to be marked out if you're only testing one specific part. So yeah, it's just we figured out this sweet spot worked really well, and it was like a 10x improvement in efficiency, providing the test, as well as getting more confidence even, because just a few of these, when you call the use cases, they give such a nice return of investment, so that became like my main recommended testing strategy now, is to start covering the use cases with the Cypress component testing, and basically then you fill out the other parts. There's still like a time and place for end-to-end tests, which mostly focuses just on a few smoke tests, and then the unit test can still like work for like the edge cases, and maybe like something that has more calculation, something where you want to run a lot of smaller fast tests on, let's say, a set of boundary values, which spinning up the whole integration test suite might be overkill, where you just want to like run through a lot of calculations and edge cases. And then you had like, I also took the static part with, which is like we just often use TypeScript, and ESLint just max out this, because it's probably the cheapest way you can catch errors. Is just typing everything out and using strict mode, because it's going to save you a lot of like a lot of annoying errors that can happen along the way.
I got bit by a strict mode issue like 2 days ago on an old code base that's not using strict. It's strict false, and I made some change to a library and didn't initialize some properties like they used to be initialized, and then it failed when I deployed it to our development environment because the old server wasn't using strict mode. So it was like, yeah, sure, it's undefined, but I'll let you access it anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, Christian. So I asked a question between. So probably, can you hear me right? You can. Yeah. So my question was related to Protector, because there was a time when we used to talk about Angular, it was always Protector. So can you just give a like small brief or overview what happened to Protector, and why, like now what are the different tools which we have available? Just because we are talking about testing, right?
Yeah. So as I mentioned with the how Cypress came to the market and how it was like a nice alternative to the Selenium based end-to-end testing tools, which is protractors based on Selenium, and it has all these classic Selenium problems where it was very hard to make very stable. It was always flaky. It always ended up in a bunch of explicit weights, and it was just messy test. It was you were not writing a test as the user were interacting with the tests. So that is, I would say, that's the biggest benefit you get with Cypress, is you get this retriability, and of course it's running. I mean, both are running in a real browser, and you get this nice dashboard where you can it's very easy to see what's going wrong in a Cypress test. You can see for each step, and it's running in the same JavaScript context, so you can see exactly the errors that are triggered, and that was also like harder to figure out, because sometimes the errors got swollen that didn't even show up in the console with Protractor. So because it was running in another execution context, where Cypress is running the same JavaScript execution context. So many benefits, by running Cypress, but I guess it's pretty much the industry standard now for end-to-end testing.
Yeah, I know there's some. Cypress is one of the big ones. I've been seeing a lot about Playwright recently too. I've never looked into it at all. I'm not sure what the differences between it are. And then I think there's a third one. I know people use a lot of Puppeteer, but maybe Puppeteer is used within Playwright. I'm not actually sure what the connection there is.
Yeah, Playwright is like it's like the new thing from Microsoft, and it's I would say it's still quite early, where Cypress is way more mature, and the developer tools are, you got way more developer tools as well. But I see maybe in some time, when Playwright also would have stuff like component tests, then it would be it would be very good, I think, as well, because I hear a lot about good things about Playwright as well.
Totally. Yeah, I know Cypress just launched. Well, I guess not just now. It was like last year, a whole new UI, like a whole revamped UI for the test runner and stuff like that. When you're running it with the UI, of course. And I think that everyone really liked that, from what I could tell. Yeah. Okay, so component testing versus traditional unit tests. So like, we talked about Protractor. That was an end-to-end testing solution. No longer in use. The Angular team doesn't even bundle Protractor anymore. Doesn't generate workspaces with Protractor. Now, Angular used to generate with Karma, or still does generate with Karma. I can't actually remember. But Karma and Jest are more unit testing frameworks, right?
Yeah.
Component testing versus, say, Jest. What would someone need to know about the differences there?
Yeah, so along my migration to the integration testing world, I was actually starting to write these full-on integration tests with Jest to begin with, before we had Cypress component testing, and there's some drawbacks from that, and it's a bit more beneficial to do it in a real framework like Cypress component testing, which is made for this. So just first and foremost, it's going to run in a virtual browser. It's not going to run in a real browser. Like, it's going to use JSDOM for Angular testing, which is going to have a set of problems. It's not going to be the same browser as the user's using. You often need to mock out different different browser specific methods and properties that are not, for some reason, available in JSDOM. And it's just not going to, there's some stuff that's just going to work differently, because it's not a Chrome browser, it's not a browser as we know it. Whereas with Cypress component system, you can run it in a Chromium browser, and then you can be pretty sure it's going to work the same way as, when you interact with the app in the production version of the app. So it's closer to what the user is doing, which is basically what you want, because you want to make sure it works for a user. You don't want to make sure it just works in JSDOM. So that's one thing. The second thing is, with Cypress, you have these kind of retries. You have this natural patience for interacting with the DOM, which you still don't have in Jest. So in Jest, you still have to do some explicit time management. Let's say you have some asynchronous stuff going on in your app, and you still need to maybe run it in an async test context and do some ticks or flush the microtask and all this stuff. You don't need to do that with Cypress component testing because it just waits naturally, So I would say that's the main difference. JS DOM, and there's still the weights you still need to handle. The asynchronous stuff is still harder to handle. It just you need to be more explicit about it, where it's just naturally handled with Cypress natural retriability.
Yeah, I've been bitten by JS DOM once or twice for sure.
Yeah, it can be frustrating. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and then you need to mock something out or do some weird stuff in JS DOM.
Yeah. Santosh, do you have a
But
question?
I still find it fine for like service test and like other kind of tests. But for component, which is involved in some kind of view, then it's just superior to run it with Cypress.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because services are more, you want to unit test them, right? Like you want to say, does this method return the thing that I want it to return with these inputs, right? The DOM isn't quite the same.
You might not even need JS DOM. You can do it just running pure Node, actually.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be very fast. Then you're probably going to have that. That's going to be another benefit of Jest. Then Jest is probably going to be a bit faster than, a lot faster actually than Cypress component testing.
Yeah, this slowness comes from the type checking using TS Jest or something like that, more so than actually running the test, right? When using the Node test environment versus the JS DOM test environment.
Christian, one question from my side. So, I mean, a lot of developers were using this Angular testing library, which was like really a sweet spot between like unit testing and integration testing, right? Because it lets you do almost same what component testing is letting you do, test a particular component or integrate or run the integration, right? So how does that fit into Cypress component testing? Just in case someone is like migrating from writing Angular testing library test to the Angular component test.
Yeah, I think Angular testing library also has some similar stuff like with retries, where it's like so. I mean, it wouldn't be too hard to migrate that, especially if you're already using standalone components. It's even easier because everything is you don't need to do much with the imports and stuff. So it's just import the component. What I usually, depends on like the scope of the test you did before. If you did the same kind of integration tests, then a lot of the stuff you probably did was the same. So you can probably just do it in a simpler way with the Cypress syntax rather than doing with the Jest syntax or the Angular testing library way of doing it. But yeah, Angular testing, it's kind of similar. They started doing a lot of it was a great help before. It was probably the best you can do if you wanted to do like full-on integration tests with Angular, because it had some of the benefits that's similar to what you get from Cypress, and you get like the syntax for like selecting stuff and such. So yeah, that I would say that's as close as you get to Cypress component testing. But then you don't, you're probably not running it you're not running in a Chromium browser. You're not getting the same dev tools as you have with Cypress. So yeah, it would be if you already follow the integration testing approach, then it's pretty straightforward. Just syntax change, and it's probably just going to be simpler. What I usually only import, I just import like the component under test. Then I import some type, depending on the app, if it's compatible with it. Either I import the whole app module, I import the core module with all the singleton services and all this stuff. And then everything is what it needs of like services, and maybe it needs to set up NGIX running as well. Then everything's just set up, and the test setup is very simple. And you don't need much more than that, which is another benefit from unit testing, where you probably often need a lot of different imports and different mocks set up. You don't need much more than that if you can just import your app module. But yeah, sometimes that would not work in the test, so you would just import your core module instead, and just have it as your singleton services, and then of course the component on the test you import, and it's a standalone component. And yeah, it's pretty. And then you also have the router testing module where you set up the routes. I recommend you trigger the test if it's page as some sort of routed smart component, you trigger that through the route as you would do in a real app, because then you also exercise the guards with resolvers, which I think is a lot better than just initializing the services with some prefetched data. It's better to exercise that whole routing flow as well. So yeah, that's all you need for the setup.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. And I know, so testing library, that's they're like a group, have a bunch of different libraries, right? Angular is one of them, but they also have a Cypress testing library, I think, right? Testing library / Cypress as well as / Angular, and they have, I think, a React one and all these other user events and DOM and all these kinds of things. I've never used it. We use the Angular one, I think, in our repo right now to do some of our testing. But I believe they have a Cypress library as well. I'm not sure what kind of utilities they have that Cypress doesn't have built in, but
yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. Like why you would need that if you have Cypress, but I haven't used it either, so I cannot say.
so go and find it.
Yeah, probably. I mean, they started working on it because Cypress didn't support it like component testing at that time, right? So they might have written just some APIs.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to,
Yeah, it's probably. I remember. Yes, I saw a bunch of tools, for before it was officially supported. So probably that.
yeah.
Not a lot in the documentation about it. There's a ton in all of the other sections, but not for Cypress. So Cypress probably has everything you need to be able to run component tests or full end-to-end tests, would be my guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about how unit testing with Jest is so far removed from component testing with Cypress, right? But I believe Karma lies somewhere in between, right? Karma actually, if I remember correctly, spun up a browser and ran your. It wasn't component testing, but it was running your unit tests in the browser context versus running it in a virtual JS DOM. Well, I guess JS DOM wasn't a thing with Karma, but
you can do component testing, but it was not necessarily a very nice experience. So I guess people try to avoid to do it. But yeah, there was a bunch of issues with Karma also. That's why a lot of people started using Jest. I guess the main reason was Karma was so slow to spin up that browser and load the test. It was just so slow. It was not scalable. Once you got a bunch of 100 tests, it's like it takes forever. And then I see that on Angular teams, but that's like a common reason to just like screw this, let's switch to Jest. It takes forever to run these tests, and that's then had the drawback, because Karma is running in a real browser, and Jest is is faster because it's JS done.
I think the Angular repo itself still uses Karma, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah.
But I can only imagine the amount of effort it would take to migrate that whole repo into a completely new testing solution. There's so many tests in there. It's crazy.
I still think there's a time, if before Cypress component testing, there were time and place for using Karma and Jest in a solution, especially have like an NX style monorepo where you had like different libraries. Then you could select a test runner for each library, and maybe you have like a UI library which needed the real browser to run, and then you might select Karma for that, and then the other ones was more like just pure JavaScript, and that just needs to be as fast as possible, and that is running with Jest. I did some setup like that at some point, but now it's a no-brainer. You would use Cypress component testing instead of Karma.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have an NX mono repo. Honestly, every piece of code in our company is within a single repo. And we have Jest unit testing for most of it, and then we're using Jest with like super test to end-to-end test our APIs as well. So that works really well. But obviously, we're not using the JS DOM for that because that wouldn't make any sense at all. But no Karma anywhere, thankfully. We got into Jest pretty quick. Yeah.
So just a question, Christian. So during, if I remember it correctly, I mean, when you write Angular tests, you generally like use HTTP client testing module, right, for your HTTP calls, or you mostly mock the services? How does that work in component testing? Do you still need to mock the services, or you can just use the existing services? And what about HTTP?
So for now, I'm looking into so basically you want to mock as little as possible have the highest confidence of the test. So I like to say you interact and assert on the edges of the system. So one edge would be the DOM, another edge would be the network layer.
Yeah.
So that is the only place I would insert any mocks on the network layer if I had to do any. So that would be like a service where I might mock some return value, which you need to have that mocked out. But I'm looking into doing this with mock service worker, because that's taking this all the way to the network layer. That is making you actually fire a real HTTP request, which is going to be intercepted by a service worker, and then you're going to have mock response. They're going to exercise the whole way through, which is even better. There's still some issues with that, but I think they will soon. There's some problem and incompatibility with running that with Cypress component testing, but I think it will be solved soon, and that would be my recommended approach to minimize the need for mocking. And none of it, because there's like 2-in-1. Because once you have if you have an app where you need a mock version of the app for like maybe offline support, or for maybe like if the backend is behind of development, you can do something on the front end still. Then you can set up a mock environment using mock service worker, where you write a bunch of glob expressions for different endpoints, and then you have some fake responses, so you can still use your app without a backend. You can reuse that whole mock environment for your test, and that is beneficial, because then oftentimes you don't need to write any new mocks, anything when you write tests, because you already got the whole mock environment you can use, and that is maybe represents all your use cases you want to test anyways. So that's going to make it even simpler to just spin this up, because then it's just going to be the component of the test, the app module, and then the router setup, and then you just load that, and then you just run it, and it's all ready to go, the whole setup. So that would be my recommended approach. But for now, you would go as close to the network layer as you can as possible, and you do the mock at that. So that would be like your resource service, whatever is your edge, the facade service, whatever you have, and then I would mock that service out that does the HTTP request. So yeah.
So let's say if I have to define a boundary where my component test resides and where my end-to-end test comes into picture, that can be a network layer, right? So in component testing, I'm just like mocking it or providing a mock service worker. And if I have to like go to a Cypress and write end-to-end test case, then there comes the network layer itself, right? I can connect to any environment, I would say, right, where your API exists, the real APIs, and you interact with them.
Yeah, exactly. So with the component test, you test the whole front end together for that particular component. But end-to-end test, you also you call real backend services. There's no backend, there's no real HTTP requests going through and hitting backend servers on the component test.
Got it. Over to you, Jay.
Yeah, great. We're nearing the end of our time. I want to thank you for coming on here, chatting with Cypress component testing. I'm really looking forward to using it. I've been seeing so much about it. Is there anything that you want to promote while you're here? Any resources or anything like that you have that all of our viewers might be interested in?
Yeah, I do. In my business, I do Angular training and consulting. So one thing I do is a bunch of times a year, I open up for my Angular 8 weeks advanced mentorship, where I basically teach you everything you need to know to get to the next level in your Angular career, whether that being getting promoted, getting a remote job, or getting a high-end freelance contract. So we're going to teach you like my process for everything you need to know for like learning advanced Angular architecture. And then I'm going to teach you how to use these results to get results in your career as well. So I take in a cohort at a time, and I open a bunch of times a year. Next time is going to be in March, but I have like a free workshop I run before. You can join and see if it's something for you. I do it on my site, christianludemann.com.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
So that everybody can see it when they come back to watch this. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Santosh, for joining and putting this on.
Yep. Thank you, Christian. So we have already added the website in our video description, so you can go ahead and check it out. The Christian's website is available there, and you can contact him in case you just need any help. Just go ahead and talk to him. And apart from that, of course, thanks a lot, Christian, again for joining us for our first episode. And we are really excited about this season because we will have, of course, few more episodes coming in. So next week we are going to have our another episode, and we will be we'll be back on next Friday, next Thursday
Next
with
Thursday,
another episode. Yep, and we'll see you again. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a great day. Or if you are ending your day, just have a great evening. So bye bye.
See you, everyone. Thank you, Christian. Thank you,
Yeah.
Santosh.